All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. In the last video, I rewrote version 2 of our object-oriented programming person program, but it wasn't working, and I made it work, and I'm going to show you what I did to get it to that point. I did not, to my knowledge, I did not make any changes from what I'd shown you previously in the OOPPersonV02c class. So we have a string for the first name, a string for the last name, a string for the gender, and an integer for the age. And I put some comments here so you can see what those are. First name and last name are basically set up exactly the same in that the getter just returns the first name or the last name, and the setter takes the value that gets passed in when you do a set. And basically any time that you're passing something in for a first name. So when this is what's called basically when you are calling the constructor. So it's grabbing that value that gets passed in and it's assigning it to first name or into last name. The gender was a little bit more complex, and there's different ways this could have been done. When I do these kinds of things, this is just the way I decide to do them. By no means am I saying, yeah, this is what I'm doing because it's the best way or it's the only way or whatever. Not at all. For the gender, I wanted it to accept just an M or an F. So the get did not change. All right. But with the set, what I did was I just made another variable that took that value. Remember, that could be nothing. That could be a word like male, M-A-L-E, or female, F-E-M-A-L-E, or even like hello. All right. But I wanted to take it and uppercase it because I wanted it to be either an uppercase M or an uppercase F. Then I grabbed just the first letter of that, and I assigned that to gender. Finally, for age, which was again, I decided I made the conscious or semi-conscious effort that I was going to do the validation for these not in the class, but inside of the program itself. Now, you could make a lot of cases and say I should have done it in there, and I could have done it in there. I started to before, but I had some problems doing it, so I pulled it out and put it in here. So for the age, again, just a simple get and a simple set. For the constructor, it's just setting these things in there. And I guess I misspoke a little bit earlier because I forgot to put this toString method in earlier. All right, I forgot to put it in. That's one of the reasons I was getting an issue when I was running this previously. All right. So I'm going to go over the other one right now from top to bottom. But before I do, I want to run it and show you what it looks like. So version 02, new person factory, create a new person or enter exit to end the program now. See, that works. I guess I shouldn't have said here is your person list. I should have just exited right there. All right, but it's okay. I mean, it's not bad the way it is, and there aren't any people in there either. But let's run it again. I'm going to run through the gamut here of what's in here. So the way it's set up now, notice, and I added some new lines and some stuff in here so it read a little better. But if I leave this blank, error first name cannot be empty, hit any key to continue. If I put a first name in but no last name, error last name cannot be empty, hit any key to continue. If I put in a first name and a last name but no gender, error gender cannot be empty, press any key to continue. Now for gender too, if I put in something that's not M or F, again, error gender must be M for male or F for female, press any key to continue. Finally, if I leave this blank, error age cannot be empty, press any key to continue. And if I put in something that's out of range, error age must be an integer between 1 and 125. And finally, age must be an integer. All right, and I noticed with the other ones, I put 3 exclamation points. I probably should add 2 of them there, but that's not really what I'd call a big thing one way or the other. All right, so if I do put in, let's just put in a couple names. So I'll put in myself. You can see how it's successfully added to the list. Do I want to add another one? Sure. Oops. Let's add Mary Smith, who is a female and is 56 years old. All right. We'll add 2 more people. You can see, oh, I said no. So there's the person list. So you can see it's now working. So let's go over this second example here, or the second part of the program here, I should say. So I'm going to close this and this, and I'm going to make this bigger so you can hopefully see everything. All right, we're using the list, which is why we've got the system collections generic. I'm using, rather than console.writeLine or system.console.writeLine, I'm just using writeLine or readline or write. So that's why I've got this. And this makes me able to use anything that's in that people class. All right. So I added 2 program constants in here, as you could see, and I made the decision that the minimum age, rather than it being 0, would be 1. All right. I mean, I realize that when you create something and you're, a child that's not a year old yet technically has an age of 0, but I didn't like that. I'm looking here. I notice I spelled factory wrong. There. All right. Then we come in here, and I had put in a bunch of comments, or tried to. Here's declaring the person list. All right. I called it people 2 because it's person 2. And then this, most of the program is in this while loop. We clear the screen to begin with. Then, as it says, version 2, new person factory, just what I came up with. Create a new person or enter exit to end the program now. All right. Then it comes up and it says add the first name. I mentioned this in the last video, but I'm going to say it again. This is just handling null inputs. All right. Nothing basically without blowing the program up. And the first thing we check for is, we check for in all 4 of the fields that we put in here is, did the person enter the word exit? And if they did, we just break out. We're done. All right, and we do that for all 4 fields. So there's 1 in there for first name, there's 1 in there for last name, there's 1 in there for gender, and there's 1 in there for age. If we get down to here, okay, we want to check and make sure it wasn't empty. So is null or white space, if that's the case, and you'll notice here we're breaking if it's null, but if we do leave it blank, or or hit tab or hit the space bar or whatever, we want to continue. All right. And we come in here and we just want to go down because we want to continue and put in the last name. All right. So if it is one of these, if it's null or a white space, we're going to show that error. You already saw that, and we'll continue, which is going to push us back up. The continue pushes us back up here. So it's going to start us all over again. And we do the same thing with last name. So we come in here and we read in the last name, and again we account for null, and we change this to last name in here. And notice also, I mentioned this in the last lecture, we're doing an ordinal ignore case. So when we put in exit, we can put in exit in uppercase, lowercase, or mixed case, and it'll handle it. All right. So break. Again, we check to see if we've got null or white space for the last name. If we do, we give that error, and we continue, which is again going to push us back up to the top right here. All right. Then we get to gender, and gender and age are a little bit more complex because we're doing more with them. So the first thing with gender, it's always nice when you're going to ask someone for something to give them a little idea of what it is you're looking for. So I said input gender M or F. Again, we check to make sure that it's not null. And again, we check to make sure they didn't enter exit right there. They can exit at any time. They can put in some of the information, then change their mind and type in exit. And if they do, we break, which is going to, like I said, get us out of the loop. All right. Then, just like before, we want to verify that it's not empty. But then this is a little bit different. Remember, what we wanted to do was to check to make sure that this was an M or an F. So that gender, for example, if that gender held, if we typed in hello, all right, then we grab the first letter, the H, and it's not equal to M and it's not equal to F, so it should come back and say gender must be M for male or F for female. And again, we type in continue, which again is going to bring us back up to right here. Finally, we've got the age. And notice I did use the $ in here, so I'm able to bring in the variables. So input age, and it'll say 1-125. We read it in, but notice this is a field that we want to check. And we want to check and we want to use it as an integer. But when it's read in, anything you read in is always a string. So I called it age str. And again, if they typed in exit, boom, we want to get out. All right. We also want to make sure it's not empty. If we get down to here, there was something entered in here. So we want to see if age string does hold an integer. It's a try parse because if we put hello in there, that's going to fail. But if we do put in a number, let's say we put in a number, but it's out of range. So let's say we put in 1,000. This test will pass. All right, so 1,000 will be the value of age. Then we go in and we check to see if that age that we entered, if we get down to here, we put in an integer. So if the age is less than 1 or the age is greater than 125, we just say that the age must be an integer. Notice I put two different messages in here. First, I have the same message, but it was a little hard to understand what the error was. All right, and notice both of these say continue, not break, which again is going to push us back up to the top. If you say break, it breaks you totally out of the while loop. That's what a break does. All right, usually a break is used with loops, and it breaks you out. Continue brings you up to the top, and it ignores everything else from where you are to the bottom of the loop and just brings you back up to the top. So as it says here, I try to put in comments so that this would be understandable. If we get this far, we have inputted valid values for first name, so there's something in there. Last name, there's something in there. Gender, either an M or an F, and age, which is an integer between 1 and 125. So as it says, we're going to come in and attempt to create a person2 object. Don't need the and then. I had this as one comment. So if we, after we do this, we attempt to add them to the people2 list. That's the name of our list, .add, and that is the object we just created. It's kind of nice to let the user know that this succeeded. So we say person successfully added to people list. All right, we could even come in here and I guess rather than even saying that, I didn't even think about doing it like this, but we probably could put a $ in there. And we've got what? We've got first name and last name, I believe. I never even thought of doing this, but let's see if we can. So let's say first name, space, last name, successfully added to people2 list. If for some reason this would fail, we're just going to say error and have it show us the message. But again, we do a continue, which is going to push us back up to the top. Now, previously I had this, and this is one of the reasons that it was blowing up. I had this in the wrong place. I had that up here someplace. I think it was up here. But when I moved it down, it seemed to help this work better. So we said add another person. And I just called this string another person. We're again going to do a read line of it and trim it and do an uppercase. Now, if we didn't want to do this to upper here, we could have said if it's not equal to uppercase Y and it's not equal to lowercase y, we could have done that as well. I didn't see an advantage to doing that, but we could have done that. All right, this then is going to clear when we're going to have the final list is going to print right here. So it says here is your person list. Here are the contents of the person list. All right, if it's empty as it says right there, just say no persons have been added to the people to list. That's about it. What more can you say? Finally, if this is the case, there were or was one or more people in there, so we loop through and we tell you to add this. This is just a variable that gets created on the fly. We could have called it P, we could have called it something else. But for every person that's in this person list, we start by putting in these, I just put a bunch of equal signs. You could put anything in there for a delimiter you wanted. And then we print out the entire person and we put a blank line after that. This, we got a show error in here. And that's going to print out any error that we have. Remember, we have errors that said name, first name can't be empty, last name can't be empty, gender cannot be empty, gender must be an M or an F, age cannot be empty, age must be an integer, or age must be an integer between 1 and 125. All right, finally, you've got this pause thing. And this is just basically going to say press any key to continue. It'll write that out every time. When we call this, every time when we call pause, we just call it like this. We could call it with something else. And if we pass something else in there, like say we put hello in there, that would replace this with hello. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, but you could do that. Finally, we've got a read key in here. And I was going to try to put that in. It says to capture user input in a console app, you can use the read key method as follows. All right, it reads in a single key press. It returns a console key info object with information about that. It's often used to pause a program until the user presses a key, which is exactly how it's being used in this case. All right, as it says, it can be useful for creating interactive console applications. You can specify whether to display that using the true or false parameter. All right. And they give an example right there. And again, we can go to learn.microsoft.com if you want more on that. Now, I mentioned this before, but if we take a look in here, so let me do a file save all, and I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close this, and I'm going to move this over. Now, trying to clean this up a little bit. So there we go. Okay. Now, when I looked in here, as far as I can tell, there's a 6th iteration of our BMI console program. So I think that's the latest one. There is no 7th. Yep, there is a 7th iteration of our BMI console. All right. And as far as the BMI GUI app, there's a 5th iteration of a BMI GUI app. There's a 6th iteration of a BMI GUI app. There is no 7th. So this is the latest BMI console. This is the latest BMI GUI. Why do we care? Why am I telling you that? Well, because this BMI console right there, which of course, oh, that's the second, not seventh. Close that. It's the wrong one. Open the wrong one. So seventh iteration BMI console right there. All right. So what does this have in it? All right. Everything that we talked about earlier. All right. We used functions to add error handling. We did a minimum height, a maximum height, a minimum weight, a maximum weight. We introduced data validation. All right. We used the validation class library, and we added lists. So all that stuff is now in there. What I'm going to attempt to do for the next two programs that I go over is I'm going to attempt to rewrite this seventh iteration of the BMI console. It'll be eighth iteration, I guess, and it's going to be object-oriented. Then I'm going to go to the sixth iteration of our BMI GUI, and I'm going to make that seventh iteration, but both of them I'm going to call BMI OOP. All right. Then when I get done with that, I'm going to do the same thing with the payroll program. All right. And I think I've written already, I've written both a console and a GUI version of both. I think when I get over to the payroll one, because it's starting to get more complex and there's so much stuff in there, that I think what I'm going to do with the payroll, we'll see. I've written both a console version of it and a GUI version, and I might just use the GUI. All right. Then the idea is when I get done with those 3 or 4 programs, what will be next is I'm going to take the latest and greatest iteration at that time of both my BMI GUI and my payroll GUI, and I'm going to rewrite those so that they will work with databases. Right now, we're not saving our output anyplace, and there's 2 ways you can save output, probably more than that, but there's 2 major ways that you save output typically. You either write the stuff out to a file, and I'm not going to go over files in here. There's nothing wrong with files. I'm just not going to do it. All right. Or you can save the things out to a database, and that's going to involve quite a few lectures. I'm sure I'm going to have to explain what databases are, give some examples, etc. And we'll go over at least one database, probably SQL Server. We may use MySQL or something else. I don't know, but my guess is it'll be SQL Server. All right. After I get done with that, then the goal of the next thing is to be able to go in and convert the last version, which will be the one with the database for each one, but the BMI, convert that to an ASP.NET web application, and for the payroll to do the same thing. Once I've done that, I like to think at least, I've hit the major points one way or the other in this language. I'm sure I haven't covered everything, and maybe I missed more than I covered, but the idea is we'll have well over 100 lectures at that time. All right, so that's the plan, and I will be back shortly to continue on. See you then.